This episode of Midco Sports Magazine is presented by Shields and Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.
Hello, welcome again to Midco Sports Magazine. We are talking Dynasties in this edition. Two teams and one individual who have had great success over a long period of time. We'll take a look at a volleyball program in the Northern Sun Conference, and what they have done in the last decade is almost unbelievable. And from Daryl Dawkins to Flip Saunders and on through today, the SkyForce celebrates its status as the longest running franchise ever in minor league basketball. But first, a man who started as a spud a long time ago in Moorhead, Minnesota. And now today, Matt Cullen is still skating in his 20th year in the National Hockey League. Greg Ankers has more with Cullen on his love of the game and his longevity in the NHL.
This is where it often begins for professional hockey players, participating in camps during the off-season, trying to enhance their games.
I remember being a kid when different guys would come out. Brett Hull came out on the ice with our group one time when we were kids, and I just remember what an impression it leaves on you.
Matt Cullen, now in his 21st NHL season, is this generation's version of what Brett Hull meant to him growing up, leading camps like this one over the summer months.
You can't do a whole ton in just a couple hours with a group of kids, but I think that the main thing is that you can try to impress some overall ideals on them as far as, you know, this is your opportunity to take what you've been given and make the most of it. And so here's some drills, here's some things we do, but more importantly, when you're doing everything, it's about putting everything you have into it and pushing yourself. And, you know, I think that's the biggest thing that as a professional athlete that you can share with other kids is just, you know what, if you're going to do something, put everything you have into it. And no matter where it takes you, you can be proud of what you put into it.
Matt has certainly achieved everything he's put into his professional career, nearly 1,500 games, more than 700 points, and not to mention 3 Stanley Cup championships. At 42 years old, he understands more than most what it takes to continue developing with age.
I've always loved trying to meet the challenge of number one, making the NHL, then trying to climb the ladder, and now just trying to be a good player at this age in this league is not easy. It's a young man's league, so that's a challenge that I love to try to go after. And so I mean, that's kind of what has always motivated me, is just trying to see how far I can go with the game, and I just love playing. So you know, there's nothing I guess that I'd rather be doing.
Matt's pursuit of playing in the pros didn't occupy his mind from a young age. Instead, he zeroed in on playing for the top squad in his hometown of Moorhead, Minnesota.
When I was growing up, I didn't ever dream of college or professional hockey. All I wanted to do was be a spud, and I wanted to play on the high school team. And that was it. That was my only goal, and I think that goes for most kids coming up in Moorhead or in any program, really.
Matt has well exceeded any expectations he had as a youth. Now, having played more than 2 decades at the highest level, he knows the best way to continue coming back to the job he loves.
I realized pretty early on in my NHL career that you could see the game is getting a lot faster, and so I was able to figure out, you know, that if I want to play in this game for a long time, I need to get faster and continue to get faster. And so every summer I would come home and go after trying to gain a step of quickness.
Achieving physical goals is one aspect of it. Matt's personality is another. He's shown a knack for building relationships with those around him, and that's led to multiple stints with 3 NHL franchises: the Carolina Hurricanes, Minnesota Wild, and his current club, the Pittsburgh Penguins.
It's about, you know, not only just thinking about your own self and your own game, but also looking to help teammates and be a good person and be a quality individual in the locker room. And so, you know, I try to do that as much as possible, and I think that, you know, in general, if you can be that kind of person, you're the guy that they would want to bring back, as long as your game stays at a certain level.
And given how much Matt puts in and gets back from the sport he loves, there's no immediate sign showing the two will depart from each other anytime soon.
I've never wanted to do anything other than play hockey, and I've been blessed enough to be able to do that for this long. And you know, there's nothing else that I'm really very good at. It's hockey or nothing for me, and I love playing and I love training, and so I've been able to stick around for this long and be able to do it for this long. And you know, I thank God every day for it, because I know I'm really blessed. And you know, I've been able to avoid major injuries, and I got a supportive family. So, you know, I realize how fortunate I am.
Matt and his wife Bridget are as passionate about giving back to their community as they are about the sport of hockey. In 2003, the pair started Cullen's Kids, an organization that supports children's health care needs with an emphasis on cancer. And this past summer, the foundation donated $1 million to Sanford Children's Hospital in Fargo. In addition, the Moorhead Youth Hockey Association is in the process of renovating and expanding its current arena as part of an $8 million project that was led by a donation from Matt's family. The facility has now been renamed in his honor to the Cullen Hockey Center.
Up next on Midco Sports Magazine, this is what a dynasty looks like. How they have won a national championship and another and another and another at Concordia-St. Paul.
Midco Sports Magazine on Midco Sports Network is presented by Shields and Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.
Welcome back to Midco Sports Magazine. Concordia-St. Paul has won more volleyball national championships than any other college team in the last decade. And as David Brown explains, if you're looking for the secret to their success, it's right there in plain sight.
Perspective. It's always in the eye of the beholder. You can attempt to understand perspective, but ultimately your view will be different than their view. So the question is, what do you see here?
They were working today without a ball, and my coaching staff and I were waiting for a recruit, and we sat up and watched them, and it was like they were doing a dance.
We don't have a ball, but we know we're going to work hard that rep too, even though that there's no outcome going to come out of it. We know that we're trusting the coaches. This is going to help us. We're going to jump high, work hard no matter what.
Perspective. In the volleyball world, working without the actual object itself is probably nothing revolutionary. But it's the effort and attitude that separate Concordia-St. Paul's Golden Bears from the rest of the pack.
Look at these kids. There's no one down there not buying into this, and it's just repetitious. And it could get boring if you let it. They weren't. They were slapping, high-fiving, and they were getting done what they wanted to get done.
From the get-go, the coaches really were all about hard work. And when you step into the gym, it's not only physical hard work, it's mentally you're checked into the gym.
Perspective. The man in charge of this group isn't yelling or screaming. In fact, he's more prone to crack a joke than crack down on a player. Brady Starkey is a man who knows what works.
He's pretty funny, honestly. He's really relaxed until you give him a reason not to be.
In our gym, girls don't worry about making mistakes here. They're not going to get yelled at when they're making an aggressive mistake. It's basically, nice swing, all right, keep swinging at that clip, and eventually that thing's going to go in consistently, but that's where we're going to want you to play come pressure time.
Perspective. It wasn't always this way. Starkey joined the team as an assistant in the year 2000, when these Golden Bears had little to no shine.
The year before we got here, they hadn't won a game yet. So, they literally didn't win a game in conference. It was an interesting dynamic with them, trying to get them to change their mindset into, okay, well, we're gonna win now, and we're gonna be on the right path to trying to win.
Perspective. When Starkey became head coach in 2003, Concordia-St. Paul reached the national championship and lost. They wouldn't return again until 2007.
The culture was created even by those teams that we didn't win those 4 years before that. They had created a great work ethic culture.
Perspective. 2007 was the first of 7 straight national championships and 9 in 11 years. A dynasty was born and maintained with no complacency.
The kids that are looking for some more glitz and glam and something like that tend to not come here. The kids that are a little bit more grinderish and they see the type of team that they're going to be around that really kind of resonates with them, and then they want to be a part of that group of girls.
I think there's been a lot of strong effort, tradition, hard work, and a little bit of luck.
Perspective. What you see in practice is often harder than the games. It's designed that way, for maximum effect.
It almost I would say almost over-prepares us because we know we have a really good second team. So if we can get a really good match from the second team in practice, we know we can do really well against opponents too.
We try to stay out of their way, I guess, if that's probably one thing I would say. During matches and things like that, of just letting them compete.
It definitely gives you more freedom during the game of not having to look at coach and, you know, expect all this feedback. You can have the freedom, just play the game, compete hard.
Perspective. National championships aren't instantaneous. The feeling, the thrill, the euphoria, that's all a release from months of volleying emotions. But the reason it keeps happening at Concordia-St. Paul year after year is because the perspective never changes.
It's pretty addicting. Once you get to know what it feels like, you enjoy it in the moment, obviously, but then when it comes time to be back on the court, you're like, okay, even now when we are so far away from the beginning of the next season, we know that every single rep that we're doing will be leading up to that moment, hopefully again.
It's not like a number or something that I'm thinking about. It's just literally every single team, every single year, different group, and that's what motivates me, or motivates us, is the fact that it's a different group and it'd be cool for this group, so let's get it done with this group.
Bears, 1, 2, 3, Bears!
And joined now by David Brown. And Brownie, first of all, you cover the Northern Sun Intercollegiate Conference in our coverage for Midco Sports Network. You kind of get attached to great programs like this, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Concordia-St. Paul's not just one of the best programs in the NSIC, but in all of Division II. And seeing how successful they've been year after year after year does nothing but good for the conference as a whole.
And for the school, right? They are great. Does that rub off on other programs within Concordia-St. Paul?
It absolutely does. You saw Mark McKenzie, who's the athletic director for Concordia-St. Paul in the story. He also doubles as their head baseball coach, and he says he's brought his players to a volleyball practice to see how they conduct themselves, how they practice, how they learn. Other coaches at Concordia-St. Paul from all different sports have also come in just to watch volleyball practices. It really is interesting to see how they want to know the secret sauce, if you will. They want to know the secret behind why they're so successful.
And how long does this dynasty continue? How long can they keep it going?
Well, Brady Starkey, obviously, when he took over in 2003, his predecessor went to Ohio State. And Brady admits over the course of the years since then, he's been given numerous Division I offers, but he stayed. He has a couple teenage daughters that are in the Twin Cities area. He says maybe when they go to college, he might start looking elsewhere. But I think what's interesting is that they look at this as a year-by-year thing. You think, yeah, they've won 9 national championships. You know, what more did they have to accomplish? But as you saw in the story, they look at it as a year-by-year thing. We have to get a title for this group of kids. We have to get a title for that group of kids. That's what I think keeps them going, because winning 9 championships in 11 years, you would think, you know, at some point, you know, they might diminish at some point, but they keep trying to go after that success year after year.
Just keep stacking it up, right?
Absolutely.
Good story, buddy. All right, thanks a lot, David Brown. When we come back, a look back at 30 years of the biggest names and the biggest games with the Sioux Falls SkyForce. But first, more hoops with Kirk Hinrich in this month's Science of Sports.
Sports science is really understanding the physiology and the biomechanics behind athletic performance and health and safety. Kirk Hammett was a successful NBA player for many years. He was able to take good shots, be really efficient with his movement, play tough, hard defense, but he always seemed to be at the right spot at the right time. That really comes through experience and being able to recognize patterns, being able to anticipate how your opponent is going to move before he even initiates that movement, so that you see it in your head before it even happens. Kirk is a hard worker, and he's put in thousands of hours in the gym just to be able to hone the skills that are required to go out in a game and perform at the highest level.
Midco Sports Magazine on Midco Sports Network is presented by Shields and Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.
Welcome back. From Daryl Dawkins to Flip Saunders to an affiliation now with the Miami Heat, the SkyForce is celebrating 30 years of giving basketball fans in Sioux Falls a chance to bump up against the big time. Here's a look back at 3 decades of the big names and the big games.
I remember going to the arena and Section B, Row 1.
Mike Heineman was just turning into a teenager when the SkyForce came to Sioux Falls in 1989.
My family's a basketball family. We grew up watching the Lakers and the Celtics and the Bulls in the 80s, and when the SkyForce came here, it was cool to actually have a pro team to go watch in, home city. So we latched onto it right away.
For the first years, though, the Heinemans were just big fans and big corporate sponsors. The first team owners were a group called Kemper Lesnick, a marketing and communications company in Chicago. The SkyForce was their first foray into minor league basketball.
That's, kind of how it all got started, through the name the team deal and getting the arena fixed up for it.
Gary Weckworth was at Kello TV in 1989, and he and Mark Ovenden were there for the TV broadcast of the first SkyForce game at the Sioux Falls Arena.
We brought in Pat O'Brien from CBS at the time, so everybody knew Pat from Sioux Falls native.
You are looking live here at the Sioux Falls Arena on Russell Street in Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
It was just all the pomp and circumstance that went along with it, and it was just like you made the big time. This is just cool to have these guys here.
The first league the SkyForce played in was the CBA. The Continental Basketball Association had a loose arrangement with the NBA to develop players. CBA guys could sign 10-day call-up contracts with NBA teams. And Ralph Lewis was the first SkyForce star, set a team record with 46 points in the franchise's first win in 1989, and got called up later that season by the Detroit Pistons. Bobby Phills was another great from the early years, called up by the Cleveland Cavaliers in 1992. Attendance was great, and the buzz was big for the only pro team in town at the time. But not all was rosy for the ownership group, and by 1993, Kemper Lesnick wanted out.
They had lost a considerable amount of money running the franchise and decided that that was enough and they were going to move it. And so actually the impetus behind it was Tom Walsh. He came to Roger and to me and Bob Correa and said, "Hey guys, what do you think? Maybe we should buy this." And we'd had so much fun with it and saw how much fun everybody was having with it, we decided to buy it.
So under the local ownership of 4 Sioux Falls businessmen, the franchise was more fun than ever. The connection between the CBA and the NBA was a big attraction. Flip Saunders coached the SkyForce for 1 season before moving on to the Minnesota Timberwolves in 1995. His point guard in Sioux Falls, Derek Martin, was going back and forth between the SkyForce and the Timberwolves on 10-day contracts. Henry James, one of the greatest shooters ever, was shuffling between the Force and the Houston Rockets. And then there was the man from the planet Lovetron.
Probably the most fun guy we ever had was Daryl Dawkins.
During the 95-96 season, the man who called himself Chocolate Thunder endeared himself to Sioux Falls fans, and he played in maybe the most notable game ever at the arena. SkyForce against the Florida Beach Dogs. Daryl Dawkins matched up against 7'7" center Manute Bol. In the 90s, CBA teams did not have direct NBA team affiliations. In those days, it was pretty much a free market. Any player could sign with any CBA team, and any coach could go out and get any player they wanted.
That was one of the advantages that we had as a franchise back then, is everybody wanted to play for Mo McCone.
McCone is still the franchise leader in games coached and games won, and he brought Sioux Falls its first championship in 1996. The mid-90s were high times for the CBA in Sioux Falls. But then it came along, Isiah Thomas. Thomas was an NBA darling, 12-time All-Star and world champion with the Detroit Pistons. In 1999, the NBA wanted to take control of the CBA. They wanted to start by having Isiah buy 1 team, but Thomas wanted to buy the whole league.
Idaho and Sioux Falls didn't want to sell. We wanted to play in the league, but we wanted to own our franchises. He'd have nothing to do with that. He wanted nothing to do with us. So we either had to sell or just close it. So we sold it. And then he ran it in the ground in about 1.5 years.
In 2001, Thomas had bailed to become head coach of the Indiana Pacers. The CBA ended up in bankruptcy, and the league folded. Heineman and his business partner, Roger Larson, went to court to get their franchise back. They paid off Isiah's debts, found a new league, the IBL, to play in temporarily, and in the end, they kept the Force alive.
It was down to, we had to finish the deal that day or the league was going to fold. And we got the deal finished at 5 o'clock that afternoon, and we played at 7 o'clock that night.
Several other former owners had regained control of their teams as well, and by 2002, the CBA was back in business. And in Sioux Falls, local players trying to make their way to the NBA were an added attraction. Current Sanford Health executive Nate Blesson played at the University of South Dakota, played 1 year in Portugal, and then tried out and made the SkyForce roster in 2002.
It really helped me because I went and played in the CBA the next year, so it was a good springboard for me to kind of get used to that level of play, that athleticism.
The early 2000s were not exactly the best days for the Force franchise. 5 head coaches in 5 years, a record under 500 in that half-a-decade span. But things rebounded in 2005 with a second CBA championship, this one under head coach Dave Yeager. And then another big shift in the SkyForce scene. The NBA had started the D-League, another attempt to set up a minor league system that the NBA owned and controlled. They wanted the SkyForce and its operational expertise.
A minor league franchise is different than is an NBA franchise. And they had nobody that knew what they were doing. And they just lost all kinds of money, and then they finally convinced us to come into their league, and it really stabilized things.
And the new league brought some new excitement. D-League teams could have direct affiliations with NBA teams, and Sioux Falls hooked up with Minnesota and Charlotte and Detroit. And the Pistons were the first NBA team to assign a player to Sioux Falls. Amir Johnson was 20 years old when he joined the SkyForce in January of 2007, and he lit up the arena. Johnson is still in the NBA today with the Philadelphia 76ers. Current Portland Trailblazers assistant Nate Tibbetts was the head coach in Sioux Falls for 2 D-League seasons, and his best player was Kasib Powell.
I wanted to go the minor league route. Nate Tibbetts gave me a call, and it was one of the places I wanted to come to, so, you know, it just kind of worked out perfect.
Fast forward 10 years, and the D-League is now the G-League, sponsored by Gatorade. Powell is now a SkyForce assistant coach, but he is employed by the Miami Heat. In 2013, Sioux Falls and Miami became single affiliation partners. Miami deals with the players and the coaches and runs the basketball operations. Sioux Falls runs the game operations and everything else. There are 27 G-League teams, and most NBA teams have their G-League affiliate in a city within a few hours away. But Miami is just fine with Sioux Falls being a 2,000-mile trip.
They know if they send a player here, he has the best weight room, he has the best basketball facility, you know, so that alone makes them comfortable to be able to send players here.
They trust that we know what we're doing here and have built something here that is tough to replicate. I mean, you can't just build a Pentagon, you can't just hire a staff that's got 60 years of minor league experience. You know, we've built something here that is valuable.
The SkyForce is already the longest-running minor league basketball franchise in the country. 30 years of moments and memories, and making Sioux Falls a little better place to be.
This has been in our family for so long. It's part of who we are, and I think now it's a part of who Sioux Falls is.
The community embraces the SkyForce. The Heinemans are great owners. They always have been. I would put it up to any other organization still today. I don't think that anyone can match what they do here.
Before we go this month, an update on a story that we first brought you in April of 2016. Gannon Moore, a Sioux Falls Lincoln High School graduate, continues to chase his rugby dreams. For the past 2 years, he's been part of a club in New Zealand, and Moore was invited to join the USA Eagles in Chicago to play in an event called Rugby Weekend at Soldier Field. And then Moore will be back in the United States in the spring to play in the MLR, the Major League Rugby organization.
This has been Midco Sports Magazine, presented by Shields and Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine.